It had only been 2 weeks since David's funeral, and Sarah was still wearing black as a sign of mourning. The grief clung to her like a heavy cloak, and although she tried to remain composed, her heart felt hollow. At 65, she had imagined her later years would be filled with quiet evenings with David, not loneliness. When she received the invitation to her grandson Leo's first birthday party, Sarah hesitated. Her younger sister Jessica had organized the event, and though their relationship had always been strained, Sarah decided to attend. She thought a family gathering might bring her a small comfort, especially in the presence of little Leo, whose smile reminded her that life could still offer moments of joy. The party was cheerful and warm. Balloons filled the living room, and the scent of vanilla cake lingered in the air. Children laughed, relatives chatted, and for a moment Sarah allowed herself to breathe easier. She held Leo in her arms, whispering softly, "You're the light we all need right now." But as the guests gathered around the table for the cake cutting, Jessica's tone suddenly changed. She tapped her glass with a fork, silencing the room. Her eyes darted around with a mix of nervousness and determination. Then she announced, her voice sharp and cold, "Before we celebrate, I need to reveal the truth. Leo is not just my son, he is David's son. And I have the will to prove it." The words sliced through the air like a blade. Gasps erupted from the guests. Sarah froze, the color draining from her face. For a moment, she thought she had misheard, that grief had clouded her senses. Jessica reached into her purse and pulled out a folded document. She waved it triumphantly, her lips curling into a bitter smile. According to this, David left half of his house, worth $800,000, to me for Leo's future. It's only fair. He is David's child after all. The room fell into stunned silence. Plates clattered onto the table. Sarah felt her knees weaken, and she gripped the edge of the chair to steady herself. Her mind raced. David? Betray me? After 38 years of marriage? No, this isn't possible. Trying to keep her composure, Sarah lifted her chin. Her voice trembled but carried a quiet strength. "Jessica, what are you saying? How dare you bring this up today at your own son's birthday? And more importantly, how could you insult David's memory like this?" Jessica's eyes flashed with defiance. "I'm only fighting for what belongs to Leo. Don't think you can keep everything for yourself, Sarah. David wanted his son to be cared for." The guests exchanged confused, horrified looks. The cheerful party atmosphere had evaporated, replaced by tension so thick it was hard to breathe. Sarah clutched her necklace, the one David had given her on their 25th anniversary, and felt a wave of sorrow mixed with anger. She realized, in that moment, that this was not just grief speaking. Jessica had planned this ambush. And Sarah vowed silently, "If Jessica wants a battle, she will have one. But she has no idea the truth I hold." When Jessica's words echoed in Sarah's mind, she almost laughed, not because they were funny, but because of how absurd and impossible they sounded. If only Jessica had known the truth. David could never have fathered Leo. Sarah's memory drifted back to the early years of their marriage, when she and David were still filled with dreams of building a family. They had been married for nearly 10 years when the truth came crashing down. She remembered the countless doctor visits, the sterile smell of clinics, the endless tests. Each appointment had carried a small flame of hope, only for it to be extinguished by another grim shake of a doctor's head. One afternoon, after a particularly long consultation, Sarah sat beside David in the car, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. "They said it again," she whispered. "We can't have children. Not now, not ever." David's hand found hers, warm and steady. He turned to her, his voice low but resolute. "Sarah, look at me. Children or no children, you are my life. We promised each other love, and that promise is enough. Do you hear me?" But Sarah's heart had broken a little that day. The dream of hearing little footsteps in the hallway, of watching a child grow, had been stolen from them. Nights followed where she cried silently into her pillow, wondering if she had failed as a wife, as a woman. David never blamed her. He never let her drown in guilt. Instead, he filled their lives with laughter, with late-night dances in the kitchen, with handwritten notes tucked into her books, with vacations where they rediscovered each other again and again. Once, on their 15th anniversary, David surprised her with a small garden in their backyard. He planted roses and tulips himself, saying, "If we can't raise children, then let's raise beauty. Let this garden be our legacy." Over the years, Sarah had come to accept that David's love was indeed enough. They were complete, even without children. And now, standing in Jessica's living room, Sarah felt both anger and sorrow rise within her. Jessica's claim wasn't just a lie, It was a cruel stab at the deepest wound Sarah and David had ever carried. How dare she? Sarah thought. How dare she drag David's memory through the mud when she knows nothing of our pain, our struggles, our truth. Her lips pressed into a firm line. Jessica had opened a door that she should never have touched. And Sarah knew for the first time that she would have to reveal David's secret, not to the world but to protect his honor and hers. Sarah didn't even need to study the paper closely. She knew every curve, every loop of David's handwriting by heart. For 38 years she had seen his notes on grocery lists, birthday cards, love letters slipped under her pillow. The will Jessica waved in the air was nothing like David's hand. The strokes were forced, shaky, unnatural. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Does Jessica really think I wouldn't notice? Around her, the room buzzed with murmurs. A few relatives craned their necks to get a glimpse of the document, whispering behind their hands. Jessica stood smugly at the center, chin high, holding the will as though it were a holy relic. This is proof, Jessica declared, her voice trembling slightly but loud enough to command attention. David wanted fairness. He wanted me, Leo's true mother, to inherit half the house. That's what this says. Sarah didn't reply. She didn't shout or argue. She simply looked Jessica in the eye with a calm, piercing stare, the kind that made Jessica falter for a brief second. Then, with steady composure, Sarah set her wine glass down, excused herself from the party, and left. On the drive home, her heart pounded, not from fear but from a cold, rising fury. She had suspected for years that Jessica's jealousy could twist into something destructive, but never had she imagined her sister would go this far, lying about David, about Leo, about everything. The next morning, Sarah drove to the bank. Her hands shook slightly as she signed the forms to access the safe deposit box David had opened years ago. The clerk handed her a small brass key, and she was led to a quiet, dimly lit room where the metal drawer awaited. Sliding the box open, she found an envelope sealed in David's familiar handwriting. On the front, written in his steady hand, were the words, "For Sarah, in case Jessica causes trouble." Her breath caught. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the letter inside. "Sarah, my love," it began. "If you are reading this, it means Jessica has gone too far. I have always feared her envy would lead her into dangerous lies. Please don't doubt yourself. You and I know the truth of our life together. Enclosed is my real will, witnessed and notarized, leaving everything to you as it should be. Keep this safe, for I trust you to defend our love and our home." Tears blurred Sarah's eyes as she held the paper close. David had known. Even in death, he had protected her. Alongside the letter was his authentic will, stamped, signed, and legally binding. There were also other documents, insurance policies, property deeds, financial statements, meticulous records that proved David's care and planning for her future. In that moment, Sarah felt both immense grief and renewed strength. David's foresight was a shield against Jessica's schemes. As she closed the metal box and returned the key, a thought hardened in Sarah's mind. Jessica hadn't just forged a will. She had underestimated Sarah, and that would be her downfall. Sarah knew that Jessica's scheme was only the tip of the iceberg. The forged will was desperate, sloppy, and desperation always pointed to a deeper secret. She needed proof, not just suspicion. That was when she decided to hire Detective Clark, a retired police officer with a sharp eye for lies and a reputation for uncovering the truths people tried hardest to bury. Clark met Sarah at a quiet cafe, his notepad already open. "You think your sister is hiding something big," he said. His voice was low, calm, but carried the confidence of someone who had seen 100 messy family disputes. "I don't think," Sarah replied, her hands clasped tightly around her coffee cup. "I know." Within a week, Clark had dug up more than Sarah could have imagined. He slid a thick file across the table to her, filled with photographs, receipts, and legal notices. "First, Leo is not David's son," Clark said plainly. "The boy's father is Mike Turner, a mechanic from the East Side. He and Jessica were in a short relationship around the time Leo was born. Mike's name is on Leo's original birth certificate." Sarah felt a rush of both relief and anger. Relief that David's memory remained untarnished, but anger that Jessica would dare smear his name with such a vile lie. Clark continued, flipping through the file. "Mike hasn't been involved in Leo's life. He didn't even show up for the boy's first birthday party. From what I can tell, he walked away when Jessica started demanding money he didn't have." The detective paused, then tapped a stack of papers. "And this is where things get worse. Jessica owes $90,000. Credit cards, payday loans, overdue rent, you name it. She's 3 months behind on payments, and her landlord has already filed eviction papers. If she doesn't come up with the money soon, she and Leo will be out on the street. Sarah's stomach churned. It all made sense now. The fake will, the outrageous lie about Leo's parentage. Jessica hadn't been trying to honor David's legacy. She had been trying to buy her way out of ruin. She thought she could scare me into giving her half the house, Sarah whispered bitterly, her eyes fixed on the damning evidence spread across the table. Clark leaned back in his chair, studying her carefully. People drowning in debt will do desperate things, Mrs. Henderson. Your sister may not stop here. You need to be prepared. Sarah nodded slowly, her resolve hardening. The betrayal cut deep, not just because Jessica had lied, but because she had dragged David's memory and Leo's innocence into her selfish game. For the first time since David's funeral, Sarah felt something sharper than grief. She felt fire. Jessica wanted to gamble with lies, but Sarah now held the truth. And with Clark's help, she was ready to confront her sister. And make sure this time, there would be no escape. Sarah had never been the type to seek conflict, but this time, avoidance was no longer an option. The lies had gone too far, poisoning the memory of her husband and threatening everything she had built. She knew she couldn't allow Jessica to keep twisting the truth. With Detective Clark's advice, Sarah prepared carefully. She carried a small voice recorder tucked discreetly inside her handbag, her insurance in case Jessica tried to deny everything later. That evening, Sarah drove to Jessica's house. The front yard was dimly lit, toys scattered on the grass, and a pile of unopened bills visible on the porch table. It was the silent proof of Jessica's crumbling world. Sarah rang the bell. Jessica opened the door, her eyes bloodshot as though she hadn't slept. For a moment, her expression softened at the sight of her sister. "Sarah, I didn't expect you." Sarah's tone was steady, almost unnervingly calm. "We need to talk, Jess. About David. About Leo. And about the will." Jessica flinched, her hand tightening on the doorknob. "You're still clinging to your bitterness. I already told you the truth." "No," Sarah cut her off, stepping inside. "You told me lies, and I'm done listening to them." The living room was a mess, piles of clothes, stacks of debt letters, Leo's toys strewn across the floor. Sarah sat down deliberately, pulling out a piece of paper from her bag. It was one of the documents Clark had uncovered. "Jessica," Sarah said, her voice firm, "I know Leo is Mike's son. I know you forged that will. And I know you're drowning in $90,000 of debt. Do not insult me by denying it again." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Jessica's eyes darted toward the paper, her lips trembling. She tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You think you can prove that? You can't. David loved me. He told me." Sarah leaned forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "David loved me. He was my husband for 38 years. And you smeared his name, forged his signature, and dragged his memory through the mud to cover your own reckless mistakes. You think I'll let that stand?" Jessica's mask cracked. Her hands trembled as she sank onto the couch, her face pale. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't mean to." "Say it," Sarah pressed, pulling out the recorder and placing it on the table between them. "Say the truth, Jess. All of it." Jessica stared at the small red light blinking. Her defenses collapsed under the weight of guilt and fear. Finally, she buried her face in her hands and spoke, her voice broken. "Yes, I forged it. The will, the signature, it was all me. David never wrote it. And the affair, I made it up. She sobbed, gasping for air. "I just needed the money. I thought if I could get half the house, I could pay the debts, keep Leo safe. I didn't know what else to do." Sarah closed her eyes, pain twisting her heart. The confession brought no satisfaction, only sorrow. She pressed the recorder's stop button and slipped it back into her bag. When she stood to leave, her voice was cold but not cruel. "You've hurt everyone, Jess. You've betrayed me, defiled David's memory, and used Leo as a pawn. I can't forgive you yet, but I won't let you drag us all down with you." Jessica's sobs filled the room as Sarah walked to the door. The weight of truth now rested firmly on Jessica's shoulders, and for the first time, she could no longer run from it. Sarah stepped out into the night, her heart heavy, but resolute. The battle was not over. But she now had what she needed, undeniable proof of Jessica's lies. The next morning, Sarah sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea, staring at the recorder from the night before. Jessica's trembling voice replayed in her mind. "Yes, I forged it. I made it all up." It was the proof Sarah needed, but it brought her no peace. She thought of Leo, innocent, wide-eyed, barely old enough to understand the chaos around him. None of this was his fault. He was a child caught in the wreckage of his mother's lies. And Sarah couldn't bear the idea that his future might be destroyed by Jessica's greed. By afternoon, Sarah called Jessica and asked her to meet at a quiet cafe on the edge of town. Jessica arrived late, sunglasses hiding her swollen eyes, her body hunched as though the weight of guilt was pressing down on her. Sarah didn't waste time with small talk. Her voice was calm but firm. "Jessica, last night you confessed everything. I have it recorded. I could take this to court tomorrow, and you'd lose everything. Not just my house, but your reputation and maybe even custody of Leo." Jessica's lip quivered. "Please, Sarah, don't do that. I can't lose my son." Sarah's gaze softened, but her resolve did not. "I don't want to hurt Leo. He's innocent. But I also can't allow you to continue your lies. So here's what's going to happen." She leaned forward, her tone like steel. "You will confess the truth to the entire family. You will apologize publicly for the fake will, for slandering David, and for lying about Leo's father. You will admit that Leo is Mike's son. If you do this, I will help you. I'll give you enough money to cover your debts, and make sure Leo has a medical trust fund from David's life insurance. He will have security for his future. But only if you confess." Jessica froze, her fingers clutching the edge of the table. Tears welled again, dripping onto her lap. "You're asking me to humiliate myself, to destroy what little I have left." Sarah's eyes hardened. "You destroyed it yourself the moment you forged that will. This isn't about you anymore. It's about Leo. He deserves truth. He deserves a chance at a decent life." The cafe grew silent around them. Jessica covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking. After what felt like an eternity, she whispered, "All right, I'll do it. I'll confess. But please, Sarah, don't take Leo away from me." Sarah let out a slow, shaky breath. It wasn't victory she felt, only exhaustion, grief, and a faint glimmer of hope. "I won't take him from you, but I will hold you to your word. If you lie again, if you hurt him with your schemes, I won't hesitate to expose you. This is your last chance, Jessica." Jessica nodded weakly, her tears falling freely now. For the first time, the mask of arrogance and defiance had vanished. She looked small, fragile, and utterly broken. Sarah rose from her seat, slipping her bag over her shoulder. "Get ready, Jess. Because soon, the whole family will know the truth. And this time, you're going to tell it yourself." As she walked out of the cafe, Sarah felt the weight of her decision settle on her chest. It was not an easy bargain, but it was the only way forward, a painful agreement born not of trust, but of duty, love, and the desperate hope of protecting an innocent child. The Henderson family gathered in Sarah's living room on a gray Sunday afternoon. The atmosphere was thick with unease. Even the ticking of the old grandfather clock sounded louder than usual. Sarah had asked her lawyer, Mr. Whitman, to be present, not as a threat, but as a safeguard. She knew what was about to unfold would change her family forever. Jessica sat stiffly on the couch, her hands twisting in her lap. Her eyes were puffy, her cheeks pale. Gone was the confident, manipulative sister who had waved around a forged will at Leo's birthday party. She looked more like a child awaiting punishment. Sarah's parents, now in their late 80s, sat side by side. Her mother's hands were clasped so tightly in her lap that her knuckles had turned white. Her father's face was unreadable, though the deep furrows in his brow revealed the storm brewing inside him. Other family members, cousins, nieces, nephews, lined the room, their whispers cut off as Sarah rose to speak. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice steady though her heart was pounding. "I asked you here because there are truths that must be faced. Painful truths. And Jessica has something she needs to say." Jessica swallowed hard. Her gaze darted to Sarah, who gave her a slight nod of encouragement. Trembling, Jessica stood. Her words came out halting, but the room was so silent that every syllable struck like a hammer. "I lied," she whispered. "About everything. Leo is not David's son. He's Mike's. And the will I showed you, it wasn't real. I forged it." Gasps rippled through the room. Sarah's mother let out a soft cry, covering her mouth with a shaking hand. Her father slammed his cane against the floor. "Jessica, how could you? After all David did for this family, you dare drag his name through the mud?" Jessica's tears spilled freely now. "I was desperate. I'm drowning in debt. I thought if I could take half the house, I could fix everything. You thought wrong." Sarah's father barked, his voice trembling with fury. "You didn't just try to steal from Sarah. You tried to destroy the memory of a good man. Your own brother-in-law." Bitter words erupted across the room. Cousins muttered disgrace and shameful. An aunt shook her head in disbelief. Sarah's mother sobbed quietly, her frail shoulders trembling. Sarah raised her hand, silencing the room. "That's enough. Jessica has confessed. She has admitted the truth. It's painful, but at least now it's out in the open. For Leo's sake, we must face this and move forward. Jessica nodded weakly, her face streaked with tears. I'm sorry, she said, her voice breaking. I betrayed all of you. I betrayed Sarah. And I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But please don't take Leo away from me. He's all I have left. The lawyer, Mr. Whitman, stepped forward then, his tone calm but firm. Jessica has signed a legal confession, confirming what she just said. There will be no dispute over David's estate. His assets, including the house, remain entirely in Sarah's possession, as outlined in the authentic will. The weight of his words hung heavy in the air. Slowly, the anger subsided into silence. The family members looked at one another, not with agreement, but with resignation. This was their new reality, a fractured family trying to piece itself back together. Sarah's mother wiped her eyes, her voice barely a whisper. You've broken my heart, Jessica. But at least you told the truth. Jessica collapsed into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Sarah, despite everything, placed a hand gently on her sister's shoulder. Not as forgiveness, but as acknowledgement. The lie was over. It wasn't closure. Not yet. But it was the first painful step toward healing. A full year had passed since David's funeral, and though Sarah still wore her wedding ring, the sharp edge of grief had softened into something gentler, an ache that reminded her of both loss and love. The Henderson house, once heavy with silence, now felt alive again. Flowers bloomed in the garden David had once tended, and Sarah often found herself sitting on the porch with a cup of tea, speaking to him as if he were still there, watching over her. To honor David's memory, Sarah established the David Henderson Memorial Scholarship Fund. It was designed to help underprivileged students pursue higher education, something David had always been passionate about, having grown up in hardship himself. The first scholarship ceremony was a modest affair at the local community center, but for Sarah, seeing young students smiling with hope in their eyes felt like David's spirit had come alive again. This is for you, my love, she whispered that evening, holding his photograph close. Meanwhile, Leo's life had begun to transform. With the medical trust fund Sarah had arranged using David's life insurance, he received the specialized care he needed. For the first time, Leo was able to run in the park with other children, laughing freely. Sarah often watched him from a bench, her heart swelling. In those moments, she felt David's presence most strongly, like he was smiling down at his grandson, protecting him. Jessica, though still weighed down by guilt, began taking small steps toward redemption. At Sarah's insistence, she attended counseling sessions and even found a part-time job. She was far from regaining the family's trust, but Sarah chose to treat her with cautious compassion. She had come to realize that forgiveness wasn't a gift for Jessica, it was a gift for herself. I forgive you, Sarah had told her sister once, her voice steady. Not because you've earned it, but because I refuse to let your betrayal chain me to bitterness. Family gatherings were still tense, but slowly, the icy walls began to thaw. At Christmas that year, Sarah's parents, though still deeply disappointed in Jessica, agreed to share a table once more. Leo's laughter broke through the heaviness, uniting them in moments of fragile joy. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. One evening, as Sarah stood before David's grave, she laid a bouquet of fresh roses and whispered, I kept my promise, David. I carried your love forward. I've stumbled, I've hurt, but I've also grown. And I think we're going to be okay. The wind rustled gently through the trees, almost as if David himself had answered. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt peace. Not just for herself, but for her family. David's legacy was not merely a scholarship fund or a trust, it was love. A love strong enough to endure betrayal, grief, and time itself. And for Sarah, that love was enough to begin again.